Why did the laughter stop the moment she stepped into the office? It wasn't supposed to be like this. Riley Morgan could feel it in the air before anyone spoke, the casual confidence, the unearned certainty, the way power settled into a room when it thought it was unchallenged. Boots polished, ribbons aligned. Three men who had never once imagined the ground beneath them could give way. She stood small in the doorway, too young, too quiet, too easy to dismiss. The Major's eyes moved over her slowly, not with curiosity, but with ownership, as if she were already a problem he intended to solve. "Take off your uniform," he said. The words landed heavy, not loud, not shouted, just heavy, like gravity shifting. Riley didn't move. Her heart didn't race. That came later. What she felt first was something colder. Memory, the weight of nights without sleep, the sound of rotors cutting black air, the smell of smoke and blood and burned wiring, the knowledge that men like this existed everywhere and thrived because too many people chose silence. She asked a simple question instead, calm, respectful. "Is that standard procedure, sir?" The smile he gave her was practiced. This wasn't the first time he'd enjoyed a moment like this. Around them, laughter flickered, uncertain now but still present, the kind that fed on humiliation. Riley felt it then, the familiar pull between two instincts, one to disappear, the other to stand. She had learned long ago what disappearing cost. When she finally spoke again, her voice didn't rise. "Sir," she said, "you just ordered a Navy SEAL to undress." The room didn't react at first. Words like that took time to land. When they did, they detonated quietly. Eyes widened, breath caught. Someone shifted back a step. She unbuttoned her jacket slowly, not defiant, not rushed. Each movement deliberate, controlled, the way you move when panic is a luxury you can't afford. The tattoo beneath the fabric changed everything. In that moment, Riley wasn't revealing strength. She was revealing truth. And truth is terrifying to people who have built their authority on lies. But the silence that followed wasn't victory. Not yet. It was only the opening of something far more dangerous. Because now they were afraid. And afraid men don't back down. They retaliate. What happens when the test isn't about strength, but obedience? The obstacle course didn't care who you were. It didn't care about rank or reputation or who laughed at you in an office an hour earlier. It only cared whether your body and mind could cooperate under pressure. Riley moved like she always had, efficient, economical, quiet. She didn't rush. She didn't showboat. She solved each obstacle the way she solved everything else, by refusing to waste energy proving anything to anyone. The others noticed. They always did. She finished faster than anyone else had that day, faster than anyone expected, and when she stepped aside, barely breathing hard, something shifted again. Not respect yet, confusion. The range was next. That's when the first trap snapped shut. The rifle felt wrong in her hands, not broken, just subtly altered. Ammunition tampered with carefully enough that most people wouldn't notice until it was too late. Riley noticed immediately. She didn't say a word. She adjusted. Each misfire became information. Each successful shot became evidence. She logged it all silently, the way she'd learned to do in places where accusing the wrong person could get you killed. Across the range, eyes watched her more closely now. Not because she was failing. Because she was. Power hates that. By the time the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the base, Riley understood the shape of what was coming. The desperation, the narrowing options, the need to make her break publicly. The night exercise would be the final attempt. She welcomed it. Not because she wanted a fight, but because predators always expose themselves when they believe they're about to lose control. And tonight control was slipping. Why would a commander issue an order designed to fail? The building swallowed them whole. Smoke, noise, confusion by design. Riley moved through it with her team, every step measured, every command clear. She trusted her senses. She trusted her training. She trusted the silence when it told her something was wrong. The radio crackled. False intelligence. She knew it instantly. No sound where there should have been movement. No heat where bodies were supposedly advancing. Just empty space dressed up as threat. "Abort," the voice ordered. "Fall back." Her team looked to her. This was the moment the system counted on. The moment fear made obedience easier than integrity. Riley felt it, the risk, the consequences, court-martial, discharge, erasure. She also felt something else. Responsibility. She shut off the radio. When she spoke, it wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "We're finishing the mission." Some hesitated, one argued, then one by one they stayed. They moved forward, cleared rooms, extracted casualties, completed objectives. And when they stepped back into the night air, mission complete, the shouting began. Accusations, threats, rage disguised as authority. Until a cane tapped against concrete. The Admiral's presence changed the math instantly. Evidence followed, witnesses, documentation, months of buried truth stepping into daylight all at once. The Major's voice broke when he realized there was no one left to protect him. Riley didn't celebrate. She watched. Because justice, when it finally comes, is quiet. What does it cost to tell the truth when everyone wants you silent? The investigation room was windowless, time blurred, questions repeated. Riley answered them all. Calmly, precisely. The leaks came next, smears, edited files, headlines designed to reframe her courage as ambition, her silence as manipulation. She felt the weight then. Not doubt, but exhaustion. Sophia Chen's hands shook when she spoke about her sister, about reporting, about being ignored, about watching hope collapse slowly, not all at once. Riley listened. That mattered more than speaking. When the threats escalated, when careers were offered in exchange for silence, Riley never pretended it was easy. She just refused to pretend it wasn't necessary. Others followed slowly, bravely. One voice becomes two. Two become impossible to ignore. Why does accountability feel like betrayal to those who abuse power? The courtroom held its breath. Testimony peeled back years of protected behavior, not with anger, but with precision, with records, with witnesses who no longer looked away. Riley spoke last. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't perform. She told the truth the same way she'd lived it, directly. When the verdict came, it didn't feel triumphant. It felt heavy. A career ended, a uniform stripped, a system forced briefly to look at itself. Outside, the world kept turning. But something fundamental had shifted. What does redemption look like when the fight doesn't end? Months later, Riley stood in front of new candidates, different faces, same tension. She wore her rank easily now, not because it defined her, but because she'd earned the right not to be defined by anyone else. She taught control, discipline, responsibility. Not heroics. Because heroics fade. Integrity doesn't. Somewhere others were watching, learning, deciding whether silence was safer than truth. Riley didn't tell them what to choose. She showed them. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What kind of place laughs before it listens? By the time Riley reached the assessment building, the laughter from the morning still echoed in her head, not because it hurt, but because it revealed something. Laughter like that didn't come from confidence. It came from comfort, from people who had never expected consequences. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and old metal, institutional, temporary, the kind of place people pass through without ever leaving a mark. Riley walked its length slowly, clipboard tucked under her arm, eyes forward, posture neutral. She could feel a tension on her back, not curiosity, calculation. She had learned to recognize that feeling years ago, in places where the smallest misstep turned into a reason not to trust you with your life. Inside the assessment hall, bodies gathered in loose clusters. Most were men, a few women. The women stood differently. Weight shifted inward, arms folded without realizing it. Eyes alert but careful, Riley noticed immediately. One of them caught her glance and looked away fast. That reaction tightened something in Riley's chest. Not anger, recognition. She remembered standing like that once, before she learned that shrinking never made the world kinder, only quieter. A master sergeant barked instructions. Names were called, numbers assigned. The obstacle course loomed outside like a dare carved into the earth. Walls, ropes, mud, water traps meant to exhaust before breaking morale. Riley watched the first group run. They attacked the course like it was an enemy, all muscle, no economy. They burned strength early, fought obstacles instead of understanding them. By the end, they were gasping, bent at the waist, eyes unfocused. She filed it away, not judgment, just data. When her name was called, a few heads turned. Someone muttered something under their breath. She didn't look. The starting line felt familiar, too familiar. That was the danger. Familiarity bred carelessness. Riley closed her eyes for half a second and centered herself. Not here to dominate, not here to impress. Here to observe, to endure, to expose. Go. She moved. Not fast, not slow, right. Each wall was a problem with a solution. Each rope a negotiation between grip and gravity. She used momentum instead of force, breath instead of panic. When her boots hit mud, she let herself sink just enough to push forward cleanly, not waste energy fighting suction. By the halfway point, the watching had changed. No more laughter. Just silence. When she crossed the finish line, she checked her pulse out of habit, steady, controlled. She looked up and met the master sergeant's eyes. The woman didn't smile, but something in her gaze sharpened. "That'll do," she said. Riley stepped aside. The numbers would speak for themselves. They always did. The range came next. That was where the anxiety crept in, not loud, not panicked, but subtle. The kind that whispered instead of shouted. Riley felt it as she lifted the rifle. Weight distribution off. Balance wrong. She didn't need to fire to know. Someone had touched this. Her first instinct wasn't anger. It was disappointment. Because sabotage wasn't strength. It was admission. She cleared the chamber calmly. The misfire came exactly when she expected it. So did the second. A ripple moved through the observers, confusion, then suspicion. Riley adjusted her stance, compensated, fired. Center mass. She repeated the process, logged everything silently, each failure, each success. She didn't argue, didn't protest. She let the truth accumulate. By the time she stepped back, she knew two things with certainty. They were willing to cheat, and they were running out of patience. The afternoon sun leaned low, casting long shadows across the base. Riley drank water alone, watching reflections ripple across the surface. This was the dangerous part, not the tests, not the yelling. The waiting. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You moved like you've done that before." She turned. Lieutenant Drake stood a few feet away, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. He looked uncomfortable, not threatened but unsettled. "I've trained," she said evenly. He nodded. That wasn't just training. Riley met his gaze, held it, said nothing. He shifted, then tried again. "Major Keller doesn't like surprises." "That's not my concern," she replied. Drake studied her a moment longer, then glanced away. "Be careful tonight." It wasn't a warning, it was an admission. That was when Riley knew the night exercise would be the pivot. She found Sophia Chen in the supply building basement just like the briefing said she would. Alone, eating without appetite, guarded even in solitude. Chen stiffened when Riley entered. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "I know," Riley said gently. "That's why I am." They sat across from each other, silence stretched, heavy, fragile. "My sister reported him," Chen said suddenly. "Did everything right, filed paperwork, followed procedure." Riley didn't interrupt. "They told her to stop making noise," Chen continued. "Said she was hurting cohesion. 6 months later, she was gone." The words came apart at the end. Riley felt them land, felt the familiar anger rise and held it down. This wasn't about her feelings. "I have recordings," Chen said, pushing a drive forward with shaking hands. "Emails, witness statements. I kept thinking if I just had enough, someone would listen." Riley took the drive carefully, like it could break. "They will," she said, "but it won't be easy." Chen laughed once, bitter. It was never going to be. As dusk settled, Riley stood alone again. The base lights flickered on one by one, sterile and unforgiving. Somewhere above, someone was planning, adjusting, justifying. She checked her watch. Night exercise in 40 minutes. She felt the familiar tightening in her chest, not fear, but resolve. The quiet understanding that the next choice would define everything that followed. She keyed her phone once. A message from Admiral Shaw waited. "Whatever happens tonight, remember why you're there." Riley typed back with steady fingers. "I remember." She slipped the phone away and headed toward the staging area, the weight of expectation settling over her like armor. They thought the test would break her. They didn't understand. She wasn't there to pass. She was there to finish something that had been left undone for far too long. What happens when the order is wrong, but obeying it feels safer? The staging area hummed with low voices and nervous energy. Gear clinked softly. Velcro tore and resealed. Weapons were checked, then checked again. Riley stood among them, adjusting straps with calm hands, while something heavier settled in her chest. Not fear, not doubt, but anticipation. This was the moment systems revealed themselves. Not during paperwork, not during speeches about honor, but in the dark when someone had to decide whether rules mattered more than people. Major Keller appeared just before final briefing. His face was composed, almost pleasant, but his eyes flicked to Riley too quickly. He was smiling like a man who believed he still had leverage. "Tonight's scenario is simple," he said. "Hostage extraction, high pressure, limited time, follow orders exactly." "Exactly." Riley heard the emphasis, felt it. Around her, heads nodded. No one asked questions. No one ever wanted to be the one who asked. She memorized everything as he spoke. Layout, timings, extraction routes, and the subtle inconsistencies that didn't belong. He was over-explaining. People do that when they're lying. Night fell fast. The kill house loomed black against darker trees, windows glowing faintly from inside. Smoke machines hissed. Strobe lights flashed erratically, designed to disorient. The kind of environment where panic thrived. Riley took point position behind Drake. She could feel tension in his shoulders. He wasn't afraid of the exercise. He was afraid of the choice he suspected was coming. The door blew inward. Noise swallowed them whole. Riley moved automatically. Left, right, clear. Her world narrowed to angles and shadows, to breath and pressure and space. This was familiar, comforting in a grim way. Chaos with rules. They found the first casualty fast. Red tape, simulated blood. Riley signaled extraction. Brooks hesitated, then complied. "Strike one." The radio crackled. "Ground team, be advised. Movement detected in Sector 3. Possible hostile reinforcement." Riley froze, not outwardly, not visibly, but inside. Her instincts sharpened. She listened past the radio, past the noise. Nothing. No footsteps, no equipment rattle, no heat bleed through the walls. Valse, she answered calmly, copy continuing sweep. Minutes passed, 2 more casualties located, progress clean, efficient. Then the radio again, Keller's voice tighter now. Abort extraction, fall back to Rally Alpha, immediate. Riley stopped. The team clustered instinctively, eyes turned to her. This was the moment command authority was designed for, the point where hesitation became failure. Riley moved to a window and scanned the sector Keller had described. Empty, silent, wrong. Her heart beat harder now, not from fear but from clarity. This was the trap. If she obeyed, the mission would fail. If she disobeyed, she would be finished. She keyed the radio. Request confirmation on hostile movement. No visual or audio contact from our position. Silence too long. Then Keller's voice snapped back, sharp and irritated. That intelligence is confirmed. You are ordered to fall back now. Drake looked at her. He knew. She saw it in his eyes. Years of conditioning battling a single, unbearable truth. Riley took a breath. She turned off the radio. The sudden quiet was almost physical. She faced the team. That order is wrong. There is no threat in Sector 3. If we fall back, we abandon 3 casualties for a scenario that doesn't exist. Brooks shook his head. That's insubordination. Yes, Riley said calmly, it is. The word hung there, heavy, honest. This is my call, she continued. I will answer for it, you don't have to. No one moved. Seconds stretched, then Drake stepped forward. I'm with you. Martinez followed, then another. Even Brooks, after a long, angry breath, stayed where he was. Riley nodded once. That was enough. They moved. The rest of the mission unfolded like truth always does when lies are stripped away, clean, fast, inevitable. Rooms cleared. Final casualty found exactly where the original briefing said he would be. Extraction completed under time. No hostiles, no ambush, no reinforcement. Just silence and success. As they exited the structure, the night air hit Riley's face cool and sharp. Relief flickered briefly, then vanished. Because she saw Keller running toward them. He was shouting before he reached them, spittle, veins, rage uncontained. You disobeyed a direct order, he screamed. You shut off your radio, you compromised command authority. Riley stood at attention, face blank, breath steady. Sir, she said evenly, the intelligence you provided was inaccurate. I don't care, he shouted. You don't get to decide that. A cane tapped against concrete. The sound cut through Keller's fury like a blade. He turned. Admiral Shaw stood there, flanked by a JAG officer, smaller than Keller, older, but the ground beneath him felt firmer somehow. Enough, Shaw said quietly. Keller faltered, just for a second. That second changed everything. The charges were read, evidence presented. Keller's world collapsed in public, ugly pieces. His power evaporated the moment it was questioned by someone who didn't fear him. Riley watched him being led away. She didn't feel triumph. She felt tired. Later, alone, the adrenaline faded and something else crept in: doubt. Not about the decision, but about the cost. Careers would end. Enemies would form. Her name would become a symbol she never asked to be. She sat on the edge of her bunk, helmet at her feet, hands finally shaking. This was the part no one talked about. The quiet after doing the right thing. The part where courage didn't feel heroic, it felt lonely. Her phone buzzed, a single message from Shaw. Proud of you. Whatever comes next, you didn't stand alone. Riley exhaled slowly, let the words settle. Tomorrow the fight would become public, messy, political, personal. But tonight, she had done what she came to do. She had chosen people over power. And there was no going back. What does it feel like when the fight follows you home? The morning after the exercise arrived without ceremony. No alarms, no shouting, just pale light slipping through narrow windows and the dull realization that nothing could be undone now. Riley lay awake long before reveille, staring at the ceiling, listening to the bass come back to life around her. Doors opening, boots hitting concrete, normal routines continuing as if something fundamental hadn't cracked the night before. Her body ached in the familiar way, muscle memory of strain and motion, but the deeper ache sat behind her ribs, heavy, patient. This wasn't fear. Fear burned hot and fast. This was consequence, slow and deliberate. By the time she dressed, word had already spread. Not officially. Official channels moved at their own glacial pace, but whispers traveled faster than paperwork ever could. Eyes lingered as she walked, some curious, some wary, a few openly hostile. She caught fragments as she passed. Shut off her radio. Thought she knew better. Admiral backed her this time. That last word stayed with her, this time. The briefing room felt smaller than it had the day before. Same walls, same table, different air. Riley took a seat near the end, hands folded, posture relaxed. She refused to perform tension for anyone. Major Keller's chair was empty. That absence spoke louder than any accusation. Admiral Shaw entered without announcement. The room stood automatically. He gestured them down and began without preamble. "There will be an investigation," he said. "It will be thorough, uncomfortable, and necessary." His gaze moved deliberately, settling on Riley only briefly before continuing. "No one here is on trial for making the wrong decision under pressure," Shaw went on. "But some decisions were not made under pressure. They were made long before last night." A ripple passed through the room, unease, anticipation, fear. Riley felt strangely detached, as if the part of her that usually braced for impact had already accepted the blow. After the briefing, Drake caught up to her in the corridor. He looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red, jaw tight. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She considered the question. The honest answer was complicated. "I don't know yet," she said. He nodded. "That's fair." They walked a few steps in silence before he spoke again. "People are choosing sides." Riley stopped, turned to face him. "People always do," she said. "That doesn't make them right." Drake hesitated. "Some of them are blaming you." "I know. Some are grateful." "That's worse," Riley replied softly. He frowned. "How?" "Gratitude turns into expectation. Expectation turns into resentment when you stop meeting it." Drake studied her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. "You really don't do this for recognition, do you?" Riley almost smiled. "Almost." "I do it so I can sleep," she said. "Most nights." The investigation began faster than she expected. Interviews, statements, reconstructed timelines. Riley answered everything with the same measured clarity she'd shown in the field. No embellishment, no defensiveness, just facts. That unnerved people more than anger ever could. The JAG officer asked her once, near the end of a long session, "Did you consider the personal cost of your decision?" Riley didn't answer immediately. She thought of Sophia Chen's hands shaking as she passed over the drive, of her sister's name spoken like a wound that never closed, of the countless quiet compromises that had allowed someone like Keller to thrive. "Yes," Riley said finally, "I did. And I decided the cost of not acting was higher." The officer held her gaze, then nodded once and moved on. It was the waiting that wore her down. Days stretched, rumors mutated, a distorted version of events leaked to an online forum, painting her as reckless, emotional, insubordinate. Comments multiplied. Armchair analysts dissected her motives without knowing her name. Riley stopped reading after the third night. She found Sophia Chen in the motor pool, sitting alone on the hood of a vehicle, staring at nothing. When she approached, Chen startled slightly, then relaxed. They called me in today, Chen said, finally. How did it go? Chen shrugged. They listened, that's new. Riley leaned against the vehicle beside her. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of engines and distant voices filling the space between them. I keep waiting for the other shoe, Chen admitted. Like they'll decide this is all too inconvenient. They might, Riley said honestly. Systems protect themselves. Chen nodded. Then why do this at all? Riley thought about that, about all the moments she could have chosen differently, quieter, safer. Because sometimes, she said slowly, you don't act to win. You act so the lie can't pretend to be the truth anymore. Chen looked at her, eyes glossy but steady. Thank you. Riley shook her head gently. You were already brave, I just didn't look away. The pressure peaked a week later. Riley was summoned to a closed-door meeting. No notice, no agenda, just an order to report immediately. The room was small, neutral, designed to feel impartial. 3 officers sat across from her. None of them smiled. The questions came sharp and repetitive, circling the same points from different angles. Obedience, chain of command, precedent. What would happen if everyone acted the way she had? Riley answered patiently, over and over. Finally, one of them leaned forward. Do you understand that some people see you as a threat to cohesion? Riley met his gaze. Cohesion built on silence isn't cohesion, it's fear. Silence followed, thick, uncomfortable. When they dismissed her, there was no hint of outcome, just a neutral dismissal and the sense of walking out of a vacuum. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Riley sat on her bunk, boots off, uniform folded neatly beside her. The quiet pressed in. Without action, without purpose, her thoughts finally had room to speak. What if they were right? What if she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed? What if this followed her forever? Every assignment, every evaluation, every introduction shadowed by that one night. She pressed her palms together, grounding herself in the physical sensation. Breath in, breath out. She remembered something her first instructor had said years ago, after a brutal training cycle that had left half the class gone. You don't find out who you are when things go wrong, he'd said. You find out when staying quiet would be easier. Riley lay back and stared at the ceiling again. Ease had never been her measure. Her phone buzzed near midnight, an unfamiliar number. For a moment, she considered not answering. Then she did. This is Riley. Lieutenant Morgan, Admiral Shaw's voice said calmly. I won't keep you long. She sat up immediately. Yes, sir. There's been pressure, Shaw continued, from people with long memories and short tempers. Riley said nothing. I want you to know something, he said. Whatever the outcome, what you did will stand. The record will reflect that. Something in her chest loosened, just slightly. Thank you, sir. A pause, then softer. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be louder. The line went dead. Riley set the phone down and exhaled slowly. Tomorrow would bring judgment, consequences, maybe exile, maybe something worse. But tonight, she allowed herself one small thing. Relief. Because no matter what they decided, she knew this much with certainty. She hadn't betrayed the uniform. She had protected what it was supposed to mean. What happens when truth steps into the light and doesn't ask permission? The day the findings were released, the base felt different, not louder, quieter, as if everyone were holding their breath, waiting to see who would fall through the cracks first. Riley sensed it the moment she stepped outside. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Doors closed a little more carefully. Eyes followed her longer than before. She wasn't summoned right away. That was intentional. Waiting was a tool. Make people imagine the worst before reality ever arrived. Riley went about her routine anyway. Physical training, equipment checks, paperwork she'd been putting off because it felt pointless before. Normalcy was an anchor. She clung to it without illusion. By midday, the messages started. Not official, personal. Some were cautious, neutral, others sharp with disappointment as if she had personally disrupted a fragile peace they mistaken for safety. A few surprised her. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. She read that one twice. It came from an unknown number. No rank, no name, just truth, raw and unpolished. She didn't reply. The auditorium filled slowly that afternoon. Riley took a seat near the back, preferring distance over visibility. The room buzzed with restrained energy. Careers were about to pivot, one way or another. Everyone knew it. Admiral Shaw stood at the podium, flanked by officers Riley recognized and a few she didn't. Civilian oversight, legal weight, accountability with teeth. He didn't soften his words. The investigation confirms a pattern of misconduct, he said evenly. Abuse of authority, retaliation against complainants, manipulation of training environments to manufacture failure. A murmur moved through the room, not surprise, confirmation. Riley focused on breathing. Names were read, positions, consequences. Major Keller's dismissal was clinical. No drama, no spectacle, just facts. Loss of command, pending charges, removal from duty effective immediately. Riley didn't look around. She didn't need to. She could feel the shift. Power, once exposed, didn't vanish, it scattered. Then Shaw spoke her name. Lieutenant Riley Morgan. Every sound in the room seemed to sharpen. Lieutenant Morgan acted outside standard protocol, Shaw continued. However, the investigation concludes her actions were justified under the circumstances and prevented mission failure. A pause. No disciplinary action will be taken. The room exhaled. Riley didn't move. Furthermore, Shaw said, her conduct demonstrated a level of judgment and moral clarity we expect, but too rarely see under pressure. That landed heavier than praise. Moral clarity. The phrase echoed uncomfortably in Riley's chest, because clarity implied certainty, and she had never felt less certain in her life. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger. Riley stood because standing was expected, not because she wanted to be seen. She nodded once and sat back down. It was over. And yet it was. Outside, reporters waited. That was new. Cameras, microphones, questions sharpened into weapons. Riley avoided them. She wasn't there to narrate the story. She was part of it, not its owner. But the world had already decided otherwise. Her name circulated. Forums lit up. Think pieces dissected her choices with the comfort of distance. Some framed her as a hero, others as a dangerous precedent. Both missed the point. She found Sophia Chen waiting near the hangar, arms crossed tightly, eyes searching Riley's face for answers. They confirmed everything, Chen said, not a question. Yes. Chen swallowed. My sister's name is in the record now. Riley nodded. It matters. Chen's composure cracked then, just for a moment. She turned away, wiped at her face, and laughed softly without humor. I thought it would feel better, she said. Riley stepped closer. Truth doesn't heal, it just stops the bleeding. Chen looked at her, really looked. What about you? What happens now? Riley considered that. I keep doing the job, she said, or I try to. Chen shook her head. They won't forget. No, Riley agreed. They won't. The reassignment order came 3 days later. Temporary duty, remote, necessary according to the memo, a chance to recalibrate, to let tensions settle. Exile dressed as opportunity. Riley read it twice, then folded the paper carefully and set it aside. She'd known this was coming. Systems rarely punished truth directly. They simply moved it out of the way. Drake found her packing that night. So that's it, he said quietly. For now. You angry? She shook her head. No. Then what? Tired, she admitted, but clean. He smiled faintly. You're going to change things. Riley zipped her bag. Change doesn't come from one person. It starts with one, he countered. She met his eyes. Then it's bigger than me. The new assignment was colder, quieter, less visible, long hours, fewer resources, the kind of place where initiative mattered more than recognition. Riley thrived there in a way she hadn't expected. She trained quietly, mentored carefully, listened more than she spoke. People began to seek her out not for answers but for honesty. One evening, after a long day, she stood alone on a ridge overlooking the compound. The horizon burned orange as the sun dropped. She felt something unfamiliar then. Pride. Not in what she'd done, but in what she hadn't compromised. Her phone buzzed, a message from Admiral Shaw. They're revising training protocols. Oversight, reporting channels, it won't be perfect, but it's movement. Riley stared at the screen, then typed back. Good. That was all. Later, alone in her quarters, the weight finally settled. Not the weight of responsibility, but of release. The constant vigilance eased just enough for reflection to creep in. She thought about the younger version of herself, the one who had learned early that staying quiet kept you safe, the one who had mistaken endurance for invisibility. She wasn't that person anymore. The cost had been real, friendships strained, a career path rerouted, a reputation she couldn't control. But she could live with herself. And that mattered more than approval. As night deepened, Riley lay back and closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, sleep came easily. Not because the world was fixed, but because she had chosen not to be broken by it. And somewhere quietly, change had begun. Not with applause, not with headlines, but with one decision made in the dark, when obedience would have been easier than truth. Why does the quiet after the storm feel heavier than the storm itself? The new base woke before the sun. No announcements, no crowds, just wind moving across concrete and the distant hum of generators coming alive. Riley liked that. Quiet didn't ask anything of her. It didn't demand explanations or symbols or courage. It simply existed. Weeks passed, then months. Her name faded from conversation the way headlines always do. Not erased, just filed away, ready to be pulled out when convenient. Riley understood that now. Systems had long memories but short attention spans. She let them forget. Her days settled into rhythm, training cycles, mentorship sessions, long nights reviewing after-action reports where the real story always lived between the lines. She didn't chase influence. She built competence, the kind that didn't need permission to matter. Sometimes, new candidates arrived who had heard rumors. "You're her," one of them said once, not accusing, not admiring, just curious. Riley met the young woman's eyes and nodded. "I'm me." That seemed to be enough. There were still hard days, days when she wondered if the fight had truly changed anything, or if it had merely shifted the shape of the silence. She'd watch a trainee hesitate before speaking up, and she'd feel the old tension tighten in her chest. Those were the moments she leaned in. "Say it," she'd tell them quietly. "Whatever it is, say it." Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't, but they knew the space existed. One evening, a sealed envelope appeared on her desk. No return address. Inside was a single page, an official notice stamped and signed. Promotion approved. No ceremony, no announcement, just acknowledgement. Riley sat with it for a long time, fingers resting on the paper. The rank didn't thrill her. It never had. What mattered was what it represented, proof that telling the truth hadn't ended her. Proof that the system, flawed as it was, could still bend. She thought of Sophia Chen. They stayed in touch, infrequently, carefully. Chen had transferred, started fresh somewhere far from the echo of what she'd endured. Her last message had been simple. "I'm sleeping again." Riley read it whenever doubt crept in. The final test came quietly. A training incident. Nothing dramatic. No headlines waiting to happen. Just a junior officer cutting corners, pushing too hard, hiding a mistake out of fear. Riley saw it immediately. She could have handled it quietly, smoothed it over, protected everyone involved. That was the old way. Instead, she called it out, early, privately, firmly. The officer expected punishment, career-ending consequences. What he got instead was accountability without humiliation, correction without cruelty, a chance to learn instead of a lesson designed to break him. When he thanked her later, voice unsteady, Riley felt something settle deep inside her. This was it. Not the moment in the kill house, not the investigation, not the verdict. This, the ripple no one filmed. Years later, because time does pass, no matter how heavy the moment, Riley stood at the edge of a graduation field. New operators, new pilots, new leaders still learning the weight of their decisions. She wasn't on the stage. She didn't need to be. She watched from the side, hands clasped behind her back, as names were called and futures stepped forward. One of them paused as she passed Riley, just for a second. "Thank you," the woman whispered. Riley nodded once. That night alone, she thought back to the office where it had begun. The laughter, the order to take off her uniform, the moment the room had expected her to shrink. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't argued. She had simply stood. And in doing so, she'd learned something that stayed with her long after the noise faded. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand recognition. It endures, it listens, it chooses. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.